Hi, welcome to this video tutorial about how to use Wispform to check if people might be susceptible to COVID-19. In this tutorial, we will have two different surveys to show you two different ways in which this can be done, and then show you how to build each of them. Please take notice before we start that none of this is an official survey, and this is not from any official health organization, so this should only be used as a sample. So first we'll go through this survey, which uses the logic jump function to create a way of checking if people may have COVID-19. So first let's go through this. The first question is asking if someone feels unwell with particular symptoms that may be attributed to COVID-19. The second question asks if they've had close contact with someone that has a confirmed case of COVID-19. And close contact meaning face-to-face more than 15 minutes, or they have shared an enclosed space for more than 2 hours. Then it asks, have they traveled overseas in the last 14 days? Then it asks for an email to be left. So we'll just type in a sample email. Then ask the user to submit the form. So based on what answers we gave, so we remember that we said that we feel symptoms that might be attributed to COVID-19, we've been traveling in the last 14 days, and we've met someone that has a confirmed case. The thank you page will say, please quarantine and contact your doctor and get tested immediately. So this would not appear if we chose a different set of answers. So just to show the different thank you pages, because there are 3 different thank you pages, we'll show what happens when the patient or the user of this form shows that there's no risk or not much risk. No close contact, no overseas travel. So instead, the thank you page says you should be safe from the risk of COVID-19, but still need to self-quarantine. That's the second thank you page, and then we'll show you the third one as well, just to show you the different variations that can be used for the survey form. Yep, so the third one says you might be at risk of COVID-19. Please quarantine and contact the doctor if your symptoms worsen. And hopefully there will be a link to the doctor that the user of the survey can contact them. So this is one way of doing a survey form to check if people may have COVID-19. So now we'll show another way which uses the score function, which is the scored survey. And based on what answer they provide, the answer is given a particular score that determines how at risk they are of COVID-19. So this is just another alternative way of carrying out a survey to check. And again, this is not affiliated with any official health organization, and please only use this as a sample. So let's see how this is different. We have the same questions, so we'll start off by giving the most serious answers. So the score, because we put the most dangerous answers, is the highest score available, and it has the different instructions depending on what score. And since our score is 40 or more, the thank you page says, please quarantine and contact your doctor immediately. So, and the different score will appear determined on what answers are provided. So let's just show what happens when someone fills out answers that are less dangerous to show that they are less at risk of the coronavirus. So instead, this says 0 out of 70, because as you would notice, we gave answers that suggested we were not at risk of COVID-19. So these instructions will apply to the user instead. So as you can see, these are two different ways. The questions are all the same, but one has the logic jump, which is explained in another tutorial, and we'll go through it in this tutorial as well. And the other one has the score function, which has scores on each question, which we'll also go through. So let's see how we can do both of these. So we'll create a form from scratch. And we'll just quickly go through what we wrote down on the first few questions in the title page. We start off with this welcome page. And we'll start off with the questions that were in each of the forms. First is the yes/no question. Second is a multiple choice question. And the choices were yes, no, or maybe, or we could say unsure. And just to define what is meant by close contact, the description of close contact, the explanation from the Australian survey was just so the people using the form knows what is meant by close contact. But please keep in mind that this is only applicable for the Australian survey, and this could vary as time goes forward or depending on which country. So we move on to the next question, which asks if the user of the form has been traveling overseas. And finally, we want the user to submit their email address for us to contact them if there are any questions, or to if there are any more questions necessary, or to help them get tested if that's necessary as well. So now that we've done all the questions, let's start by adding the thank you pages. So let's first see how to do what the first form had. The first form had 3 different thank you pages, and depending on what answers were chosen in these 3 questions, they would arrive at different thank you pages. So first let's create that. So first one said, you might be at risk of COVID-19. Please quarantine and contact your doctor if your symptoms worsen. So we'll just copy that and paste it here. And remember, with thank you pages, you also have the option of customizing the URL of the form, and to change the text if you want to say something else apart from start over. And now we have 2 more thank you pages to put in this form as well. So this will be the thank you page if they're at the most danger or their answers suggest they're at the most risk of COVID-19. But we'll also tell them that they still need to self-quarantine. So now that we finish all 3 thank you pages, we want to set the jump logic to determine which answers provided to the 3 questions will lead to which thank you page. So first, if they're at the most risk, which is if they're feeling symptoms, as well as they've potentially been at risk through close contact or recent travel to COVID-19, we want to give them the highest warning and a thank you page that tells them to quarantine immediately and get tested as soon as possible. So let's start setting the display logic to come to this thank you page if they meet these prerequisites. We finish with that, so now we want to set the jump logic for the answers that give a medium risk of them being of them catching COVID-19. So the medium risk could be they don't feel symptoms currently, but they have been at risk through overseas travel or through contact with someone that has a confirmed case. So let's set these thank you pages to you might be at risk. Okay, they're already in the first thank you page that suggests they might be at risk. So we can leave that. And then for all other cases, we can display the thank you page saying that they should be safe, but they still need to self-quarantine. Great. So now we'll go through this survey and see if it runs like the one that we first showed at the beginning of this tutorial. So if the person shows the highest risk of being at COVID-19, the thank you page should tell them to contact the doctor immediately and quarantine immediately and get tested immediately. Okay, that's what we wanted. So we'll check the other thank you pages. Okay, so it says you might be at risk at COVID-19. So that was what we were looking for. And finally, we need to show a user saying that they're at the least risk of COVID-19. Great, so the thank you page says the user should be safe from COVID-19, as the user of the page said that they do not feel any symptoms and they have not been overseas or in close contact with someone who has a confirmed case. So all the 3 thank you pages are shown at the particular answers given that would assess how at risk the user is of getting coronavirus. So now that we've finished using the jump logic to arrive at 3 thank you pages, let's see how to build this survey instead, which rather than having 3 thank you pages in a logic jump, this has the score system which scores the user depending on how at risk they are from their answers. So first of all, this only has 1 thank you page, so we'll get rid of 2 of them. And As we can see on the right hand side, there's a function to add a score. So through each of the questions, we can add a particular score, and then that score should show up on the thank you page. So first, remember we can't have jump logic if we're doing this. So we have to remove the jump logic that we have just put on there before. So let's get started in adding the scores to each of the questions. So if they say they show symptoms, let's say this adds 20 points to the score. If they've had close contact with someone with a confirmed case, this could be 10 points to the score. And remember that this score is accumulated through each question that they go through. So if they answered yes for this, they had 20 points. And if they answered yes to this gives them 30 points in total. For this question, we will also, let's say, 10 points. So the most serious question, since it's worth the most points, is the question 1, ask them if they have symptoms. And as we can see, this gives a score just out of 40. So when we fill out these questions and give the answers, which will determine the score, it should say what the total score is by the time we get to the thank you page. And we can change the text of the thank you page to reflect what the directions for the person going through the form at each particular score. So zero to 10 points, we could just add the text of one of our thank you pages. Remember that these points are all arbitrary and this is not a recommendation by any official health body. So please remember that this is just, for the third time, please remember that this is just, should be used as a sample. And finally, for the 30 to 40 point range, which is the most at risk, we want to give them the strongest instructions. Okay, so let's go through the survey and see what happens to the thank you page at the end after we've filled out all the answers to the questions. So first let's see the result at the thank you page when we give the most at-risk answers. So we say we have symptoms, we've had close contact with someone, and we have traveled overseas. So the score is 40, which is giving us the strongest instructions. Now, if we show we're at medium risk of COVID-19, so no symptoms but close contact, and traveled overseas, that's only 20 points, and we get these instructions. Finally, if we show that we are not at much risk, we arrive at 0 points. So we completed both using the logic jump and the scoring system to show how two forms reflecting surveys to check if people may have COVID-19 can be created. So I hope this has been useful for you to learn how to use, if you need to use this website for your own COVID-19 forms. So thank you for watching.